Are you ready? Yeah. Okay, let's get going. First up today is a Prairie brass band from Arlington Heights under the direction of Mary Gingrich. Remember an English rock group that tried to do a rock and classical music fusion. The group was called the Moody Blues in the 1970s. They did tunes like Knights in the White Sand and lots of other successful things. But the flute player in that group was a man named Ray Thomas, who decided after a few years of touring with a rock band, he wanted to set out on his own. He wanted something fresh. So he wrote several new compositions, produced a new album under his name, and mostly in the style that he'd been doing. But the title track of the album was a piece called From Mighty Oaks. It was a large symphonic work, had nothing to do with the rest of the Moody Blues stuff. He recorded it in the studios of London, and it became the title track of the album, completely different than anything they'd done. It was meant to depict a young boy wandering out into the English countryside and encountering the majestic English oak trees, wandering around looking at nature, and then slowly passing out of the forest and going back home. Here's the very first brass band arrangement of that piece. Please welcome the Prairie Brass Band, with their conductor Mary Gingrich, and From Mighty Oaks. should point out that Mary's making her premiere performance debut as conductor of the band. The band used to have some old guy conducting, but he left, so Mary's stuck with the job. Thomas Tallis is one of England's most prolific composers, but he lived in the 1500s and wrote primarily choral music. He worked all of his life as a choral composer at the Chapel Royal, King Henry VIII, Queen Mary, and finally for Queen Elizabeth. And as a composer of vocal music for the church, he wrote music for Catholics, and then Protestants, and then Catholics again. It didn't seem to matter to him. He just kept writing his own way, and was all successful. He was so influential a musician that Queen Elizabeth granted him a monopoly to print and publish all the vocal music for the entire country. He essentially owned it all. Unfortunately, he botched the business end of it and didn't do too well. Peter Graham, currently one of England's most respected composers for brass band, used the short canonic hymn of Thomas Tallis as the inspiration for a rather short prelude to be performed before a lecture that he was giving just a few years ago. That piece sort of started as an incidental piece and now has become very popular and very successful. Once again, Mary Gingrich, the Prairie Brass Band with Peter Graham's Prelude on Tallis. Do a commercial here, I suppose. In addition to all the performances today, we also have a vendors area down in the commons part of the building. I encourage you, even if you're not a player, to go down and take a look at the instruments, the music, the mouthpieces, mutes, all that sort of thing. It's really, there's some instruments on display there that I don't think you're going to see probably at any other concert or show anywhere in the country. Some really big things. During the second half act of the musical Les Miserables, Valjean sings about the young man Marius, begging God to save Marius and return him home to Cassette. Please welcome Prairie's flugelhorn soloist, Dan Powers, with the new arrangement of the beautiful Bring Him Home. Dan Powers. If you don't know what a flugelhorn is, you just heard it, you can see some more out in the vendor center. There are all kinds of them. In England, at the beginning of the 20th century, one of brass band's most important and influential composers, conductors, arrangers, and publishers was a guy named William Rimmer, who wrote dozens of compositions, arrangements, and well over 100 marches. And nearly all of those are still in the repertoire today for brass bands. What are you going to play? Oh, really? Oh, okay. All right. Well, we won't do that then. Just remember what I said, so I don't have to repeat it. In direct contrast to what you just heard, so most jazz experts today, I think, would agree that one of the secrets to the tremendous success of the great Woody Herman band was his ability to skillfully blend the personnel of the band using seasoned and experienced players and exciting, fresh, young talent. He just had a skill for hiring the right people. Now, as they say, if you want a better band, you get better players. Well, Woody had a knack for that. A great example of that was Woody's hiring of a brilliant young trumpet player fresh out of the Eastman School of Music named Alan Vizzuti. Alan quickly established himself in the world of high-powered big bands with what was to become his signature tune. Played it with Woody Herman. He played it with all the other bands that he ever soloed with, called Fire Dance. And since then, in the ensuing years, he plays it at every orchestra concert and every jazz band engagement he has. It's really his tune. And it always gets great response. Here now is the Prairie Brass Band's soprano cornet player, Mark Fenny, and Prairie's own version of Fire Dance.
Mark Penny.
Well, this is an entertainment contest, so you can expect great variety within each band and between and among bands. That's a good example of that, I think. So how many remember what I just said about William Rimmer? What were we reading again? Right. Very famous composer of minor marches. But beyond all of his compositional skills, Rimmer was famous for being what the English call a brass band trainer, a very experienced brass band trainer. That's the term we don't use here very much. I guess today we probably call him a good rehearsal technician. But he'd often go to contests with 6 bands, and there'd only be 7 or 8 bands in the contest. And his bands always seemed to come in all the first 6 places. He was just that good a conductor. He always won the top spots. So, here under the direction of Mary Gingrich is one of William Rimmer's most famous marches, which I think some of you will recognize. The well-loved Ravenswood. How do you like it so far? Born in New York City, Freddie Grofé came from a musical family that insisted he study music. Don't you wish we had more of those today? He became proficient on piano, violin, viola, baritone horn, tenor horn, cornet, and at various points in his career he played professionally on all of them, which probably explains his great skill in arranging and orchestration. He became the chief arranger for the Paul Whiteman Orchestra for 12 years, and it was Grofé that arranged and orchestrated the version of George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue that we hear today. Grofé was also a skilled composer for film and radio, and in 1932 he composed a suite that he called the Grand Canyon Suite. It's set in 5 movements, and he depicts the sunrise, the painted desert, the cloudburst, sunset, and the most famous, probably, of all the movements, On the Trail. He wrote a short narrative for each movement. For On the Trail, Freddie Grofé wrote, "A traveler in his burro are descending the trail. The sharp hoofbeats of the animal form an unusual rhythmic background for the cowboy's song. The sound of a waterfall tells them of a nearby oasis. A lone cabin is soon sighted, and the travelers stop for refreshment. Now, fully rested, the travelers journey forth at a livelier pace. The movement ends as man and burro descend into the distance." Here's a Prairie Brass Band with the first brass band arrangement of Freddie Grofé's familiar On the Trail. I thought you'd probably recognize that. In 1913, the famous Russian sacred and choral composer Pavel Chesnikov was forbidden by the officials of the Russian Revolution to write any more sacred music. The rest of his career, he was forced to write just secular things for choir. His final sacred work, though, written in 1912, just before the ban was put in effect, was a piece called Salvation is Created, which is based on Psalm number 74. And although it was published, Chesnikov never got to hear it performed. In the 1950s, the great American choral group, the Robert Shaw Chorale, gave the Chesnikov piece its Russian premiere to a huge audience, and by all accounts, brought the entire crowd to tears. Conductor Mary Gingrich and the Prairie Brass Band conclude their program today with the evocative and beautiful Salvation is Created.
Prairie Brass Band.